Have you ever noticed how your students light up when language learning feels real or active or connected to their world? Well, in this episode, I'm joined by Heidi Lechner, an inspiring German teacher and instructional coach in Illinois. Heidi shares how hands on, student centered activities keep learners motivated, curious, and communicating authentically. We'll talk about why teachers benefit from stepping into their learners' shoes, how collaboration transforms language use, and strategies to make your classroom come alive. So let's jump in. Whether you're planning your first lesson or celebrating your 20th year in the language classroom, I understand exactly where you are. I'm Joshua Cabral, and I'm also a language teacher in my 29th year of teaching. Now, I also have the opportunity to support schools and teachers all across the country who are working towards increasing proficiency and building confidence in their students. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast, with over 200 episodes of practical strategies tested in real classrooms just like yours and mine. So let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Y guten Tag, meine Freunde. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and thank you so much for being here. I have to start by telling you, you're an incredible language teacher. The one thing I definitely know about you is you're listening to a podcast about language teaching. So that means you're an introspective teacher, you're looking for new ideas, you want some reassurance you're on the right track. And if that is the only thing I know about you, that is enough for me to know that you are a teaching rock star. So thank you so much for being here. So as you probably heard in the opening, if you listen regularly, when I normally say bonjour mes amis, hola mis amigos, I threw in a little guten Tag meine Freunde, because today we are talking with a German teacher, and we're going to be talking about activities that motivate and engage our students. And this incredible German teacher with us today is Heidi Lechner, and she is a German teacher at Libertyville High School, and she's also teaching English to English language learners, and that is in Northern Illinois. And if you're a German teacher, I'm sure you know her name, because she has done so much work with AATG and the Goethe Institute. She does a lot of work with her state language association in Illinois, which is ICTFL, including being their current first vice president and a past teacher of the year in 2022. She's presented at ACTFL. She's done a lot of work with CLET. I had the honor of speaking with her at the Honing Our Craft conference, which was a couple of years back in Chicago. And interestingly enough, when we were doing that conference, the Chicago Marathon was going on outside, and we were wondering if anyone was going to show up. They did. And then how were we going to get to the airport? Eventually, we did. But Heidi, we made it through the marathon on that day back in Chicago, and we're here today. And I'm so happy to spend this time with you without a marathon going on outside. So welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast.
Thank you, Joshua. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk about motivating our students through activities that are truly engaging with them. And on November 22nd at ACTFL, you're actually presenting a workshop on this topic that's called Hands-on German, Activities That Motivate and Engage. And that is going to be sponsored by CLET World Languages. So that'll be one of the exhibitor sessions in the exhibit hall. And so we're going to really get into what you'll be talking about and showing teachers in there. But we're going to get some great takeaways for ourselves. But if you are listening and you're a German teacher or any teacher who wants to learn some great ways to motivate, I highly recommend that you spend some time with Heidi Lechner at her workshop on November 22nd at ACTFL. So, Heidi, let's start talking about how you are really helping students to feel that they are using their language in ways that are active and relevant for them. So from your experience, what kinds of activities most effectively spark, curiosity in students and keep them motivated, particularly in your German classroom?
So I teach teenagers, obviously, at the high school level, and teens like to talk about other teens. They like to talk about what's relevant to themselves, their pets, their video games, their family vacations, what's on their phone. And I think that that's more relevant to them than anything. So as long as we keep the conversation, including the individual, I think that really helps students connect. As for activities, I really focus on interpersonal and speaking activities. To me, I've found that maybe the last 10 years, the most important thing to me is having students be able to communicate verbally. I tell them, hey, when you go to Berlin, you're going to be on vacation and you go into a hotel. If you ask the concierge for a double room, he's not going to say, here's a piece of paper. Please write a 5-paragraph essay about what kind of room you'd like and what kind of towels and bathroom. No, he's going to talk to you in person and you're going to have to react and engage with this person live. Students sometimes laugh. I'm not as funny to them as I think I am, of course. So what I've done over the years is I really focus on the speaking because everybody's terrified to speak in a language, especially German. They don't have a lot of experience listening to it. So it's really comes to them not like Spanish, where you hear it in the halls or on the street or on the radio, but they're a little hesitant. So overcoming the fear, right, of speaking and the anxiety is key. And engaging them with activities that are silly or short at the start really help give them confidence. So if you're talking about like tangibles, I love anything. Like today we did map races. Okay. We had to talk with friends and try to find, the countries on a map. Vocabulary games. I'm always playing something that's active, a Pictionary or password or charades, in order to engage with language or some sort of communication skill. It's interesting, but partner work. Kids are very introverted these days, way more so than they were a decade ago. And I would say that everything I do, I make sure, please turn to your shoulder partner and go over the answer. What do you think it is before we go into a big group? Everything that has to do with language, pictures are fantastic. I remember, I don't know, I did a workshop 10 years ago that I attended, and somebody handed out 50 ways to use a picture. And I don't know where the PDF is anymore, but Joshua, you can do all sorts of things, like stand with your partner in this one picture. Person on the left, talk about for 1 minute what happened before this picture. Person on the right, talk about for a minute what happened afterwards. Describe the 5 senses that you feel in this picture. So I think by using a lot of quirky activities and just having a large amount of to choose from, students are not necessarily thrown off, but it's fun and engaging and just an interesting way for them to spend the 45 minutes.
So the title of your workshop that you'll be doing at Actful is Hands-on German, and then it's activities that motivate and engage. So how do you understand that terminology of hands-on German in terms of what it is in your classroom, and what led you to use that way of defining your workshop?
So I've been working with CLET for the last few years on a textbook series, Das Reporter Team, and helping them a little bit with editing and looking at it from an American teacher perspective. And what I'm doing is drawing a lot of my activities that I suggest to the editors. I also use in my classroom. And a lot of this hands-on is getting students in there and involved, not just being passive, interpretive viewing, interpretive listening. Yes, they're all part of it. But really, how can they communicate with each other, with their peers, with me, and do a nice difference between passive and active learning, I guess would be the best way to say that.
So the hands-on is really getting involved in it and using it in real ways for them. So let's talk a little bit more about that work that you're doing with your students with these resources and how that's sort of informing the way a publishing company will, work with their materials based on your experience in the classroom. So if you take the Das Reporter Team series that you've been working with CLET, maybe just a couple of examples of here's a good activity that you could do that is relevant to students that you've suggested.
So each chapter focuses on a reporter, and there's 6 different reporters in each book, and they're teenagers. And they introduce themselves with a video right at the start of the chapter. And these videos are amazing. They're very engaging. They're made specifically, obviously, for new language learners, but they include hobbies and something about personal, about where they're from and what the home is like. And it's really meant to connect with the young person. And then they go right into a little cell phone. What do you call them? Like a cell phone conversation in
Mm-hmm.
an image, and they use emojis and they use brief language, and you can tell that they're just young people conversing. So I think many of us have used these sort of things over the years, trying to please write a Snapchat or remember and tweet, like summarize this book in 100 characters, and always trying to be on the side of the teenager, which has been a long time for me, but I still try to do things that appeal to them and that they can connect with. I know whenever I say write an email, most students today obviously don't write emails. We do it on the AP and we have to write to our teachers. But I think engaging them where they're at and meeting them where they're at is definitely something that's helpful.
And so let's continue down that track a little bit and really looking at the students and what they're doing. And how do you move your students beyond this idea of practice in the classroom to really authentically communicating? And what do those tasks look like? And in the lens of these motivating and engaging activities for students. So, how are you taking what we can often see as a practice activity and really making sure that it's leading to authentic communication as well?
There's a direct correlation between just doing the activities and creating a good communicator. I've really focused on that the last few years in my classroom, and I express that to my parents and parent night and say, you know what? Sure, we're learning German, but more importantly, we're learning communication skills. There was a book a few years ago about a super communicator, and I read the blurb and I was going to order it. And I'm like, you know what? That's what we're creating here. We're creating super communicators. From day one, Joshua, I make the kids stand up, as I'm sure you do, look me in the eye, knee to knee, focus on your partner. That's step one. A lot of kids don't know how to have a conversation, so we have to teach these skills. Listen, what did they say? React and follow up to your partner. Don't just think about what you want to say and spit it out. So from day one, our strategies are, how do we have a conversation? And then we take it a step further and we really dig in and look at, for instance, our rubric. So we'll use peer feedback and we use self-reflection a lot. And students learn that this is a technique. So by the time they're in their fourth year, they're really able to have a long conversation in an authentic manner. German 3 and 4 students are also college students through our local College of Lake County receiving dual credit. So part of that is that they're required to use this company called Talk Abroad and have 15-minute conversations one-to-one with a native speaker. This year, they're doing that about 6 times a year. Well, it's terrifying for the students the first time they do it to have that long a conversation. But because I've been building up for German 1 and German 2, how to have a conversation, the kids are able to realize, I get to listen and react, and I'm not scared to make mistakes because Frau Lechner has always said, don't worry about it as long as I can understand you.
So I think when you said that you teach students how to have a conversation, I think that's the concept that is going to resonate with listeners right now. And they're thinking, okay, how do you teach a student how to have a conversation? Which I think is particularly challenging now because of social media, and there's not a lot of face-to-face conversations or the knee-to-knee look in the eye, as you said at the beginning as well. So when it comes to those frameworks, I guess, for teaching students how to have a conversation, what does that look like? Can you give some tips on how you guide students into how to communicate?
So the last few years, I've started German 1 with a staring contest. The kids start with the person, and they don't know each other for the most part, right? And they're terrified, and they're 14, and it's the first day of high school. And so I have them stare, like turn to their partners, so they're looking directly at them, and have a staring contest. And we sit in groups, we're in pods of 4. So whoever loses then has to stand up and stand behind the other partner. So now they're going to cheer on the person silently. And then we walk around the room until eventually we have two kids left, and half the class is standing behind each child. And I don't know where I heard about this or how, but it is so funny to watch.
Yeah. So I think that when it comes to having conversations, a lot of it is about proximity. That's one of the things that students just are not comfortable with, is being in proximity to another person when they're talking and extended conversations. So I'm thinking I'm going to try this staring contest, and it's just the looking at another person. And the other thing I find, when many people are talking, they are not necessarily listening when they're having a conversation. They are waiting for their opportunity to talk. So what are some things you've done with students where that conversational language is about listening as well?
That is definitely that's correct. That's totally what I work on with them. For instance, today, German 3, we were reviewing your daily routine. So students had their discussion questions on the board. And I said, all right, here's how we're going to level up. You have your new conversational phrases, the Redemittel, that I want you, more than me too and you, I want you to start using more upper level. So they looked at the short list and picked out 2 or 3. And I said, we're going to incorporate those into our leveling up. So one of the first question was, well, when do you get up in the morning? So I asked a boy. The first boy said, no. Okay, we don't understand the question. We'll move on to the second boy. When do you get up in the morning? Oh, I know this one. 6. I said, okay. And so he was able to answer the question. I said, now, on weekdays and weekends, or just on weekdays? Yes. So we had some communication issues, Joshua. I'm being silly here, but it's natural, right? They're fumbling around. So anyway, the point is, after that, I said, okay, so when do you get up in the morning? At 6. And then I said, here's the follow-up question. Listen carefully. Do you get up at 6 on the weekends and weekdays? And then he looked at me, because that wasn't written on the board. He's just having to listen. And he said, oh, no, just weekdays. And I said, that is a follow-up question. So the kids, you see the little light bulbs, like, oh, I can do that. I can ask a why or a when or a with whom question. So you really have to show them how it works, and then kids will eventually catch on.
Yeah, I think sometimes in our language classes, we are not always aware of how much of the social practice of speaking and conversing needs to be a part of what we're doing. Because if we're just setting up what we think are really effective and beneficial speaking activities and conversation partner activities, but if the students don't have the skills to converse in their native language, and then we're asking them to do that in their second language, there are some times when I'll hear from parents, they'll say, we were in a restaurant in some country somewhere, and like the target language, I do French and Spanish, and they'll say, we were in Montreal, and, I couldn't get her to order in the restaurant. She just wouldn't do it. And then I usually ask a follow-up question like, so she's 14, and when is the last time you had her order an entire meal for your family in a restaurant in her native language? And so it's like, okay, because I think we sometimes set up our students to, and now you're going to do this in your new language, and you've never had that experience of actually doing it in your native language and knowing how to converse. So we have to be working with the social dynamics as well.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. And like you said, things have changed with online and a lot of online learning. I mean, I remember teaching on a virtual platform during the pandemic, and I tried my best to reach the kids. Like, you look straight in the eyes on the little Zoom button and try to connect with them. And it's hard, but even in person, like you said, they're a little scared of the interpersonal, but you just have to reteach the skills, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I would say we have to teach them, not reteach them.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because I don't know that, do you think they actually had those skills at some point?
No, you're right.
You're way more optimistic than I am when it comes to these students. That's great. So in your workshop, that you're calling hands-on, you are having the participants they're going to step into the role of the learner and really have that student perspective. And so when you are conducting a workshop, and you've done many of these, and I'm sure you've done these types of scenarios, where do you see the benefit for teachers to really engage in that role when they're in your workshop?
I think it's important for teachers to put themselves in the role of students because it's a very different role. Teachers are masters of their content and their craft, and they can easily look at an activity and whip through it, right? With listening to the video once and understanding all the questions. But I think that to really understand what it feels like from a student perspective, if they look at it and say, okay, you're going to watch this video 5 times and you're going to get a different piece of information each time, I think it's important for them to also hear that and see that. And I have a math colleague who told me once, when she writes her tests, she writes a test, takes it. However many minutes it takes to finish, she multiplies times 4, and then she cuts down the test so that it's doable. I think I know I do this all the time. Like, oh, I'm bored, especially teachers with multiple preps, multiple sections, I should say, throughout the day. If you teach Spanish 1 5 times a day, I'm guessing by the end of the day, you're going to be so bored with that content. You're just flying through it thinking, oh, they got this by now, because you've taught it, right? 5 times that day. As a German teacher, I don't really repeat anything, right? I have all German 1, 2, and 3 this year. So I go in fresh, and I think I look at it saying, oh, it seems really easy. Well, the other day we were talking about languages. It was in the new Das Reporter team. So die Weltsprachen. And so kids had a list of 15 different languages. Well, I've traveled a lot. I come with so much background knowledge, and other teachers will have the same experience. Well, a 14-year-old kid who's discussing in German, or the German word for Latvia and Lithuania, all they know, they're 2 countries somewhere in Eastern Europe that start with an L, right? So to them, they're like struggling. They don't know geography. And meanwhile, I've lived overseas how many different times. So I think it's important for teachers to take a step back, think, okay, I don't have this background knowledge. What am I coming at this with? And then look at it from a fresh perspective.
Yeah, I like that idea of the math teacher, where like taking the assessment or any worksheet or something that they're creating and seeing, how long it's going to take. But also sometimes you realize this is just not interesting, and owning that and changing it up and saying, if I'm not finding it interesting and I love this language and culture, how are they going to find this interesting?
Most
right?
Definitely, yes.
So for teachers who may not be at ACTFL and don't have the opportunity to go to your hands-on German activities workshop, what could you leave with them in terms of a hands-on strategy that they could try tomorrow that would really have a big impact, but maybe doesn't require a lot of prep that's been useful for you?
I'm going to go with something that I was told by my cooperating teacher a very long time ago. When you look at your lesson plan, look at the pacing. And she told me it had to go fast, slow, all your activities. So I look at it as if you're doing an interpretive reading for 15 minutes, and then you're doing a grammar activity for 10 minutes, and then you follow up with a 2-minute, turn and talk. You're going slow, and then maybe a little fast. But by then, you've lost your students. So I try to have my students get up and move every day. For me, movement is very key to a successful class. But I also look at the pacing. So are you starting with maybe a Pictionary game where everybody's up on the boards if you're able to do that? Or a walking Pictionary where everyone has a whiteboard and, draws their 6 pictures and then goes around and quizzes everyone. They're walking around for 5 minutes and using the language. Then they can sit for 10 minutes and do your interpretive reading. But then get them back up and do something else for 5 minutes of fast-paced review, or even have them answer the questions from the interpretive reading while standing. You know what I mean? So I definitely look at an eagle eye of the fast or slow pacing of all my activities.
So I would be interested to know where you continue to learn when you're looking for new ideas for teaching and some suggestions that you might have for listeners where they could do some more learning.
I'm going to shout out to the German community because AATG has been my professional organization for, I don't know, decades now. And my colleagues, because most of us are singletons, I am lucky enough to have a colleague at my school to collaborate with. But for the most part, I reach out to German teachers, not just in my state and locally, but nationally. I've worked with many over the years, and they have so many fabulous ideas. We're on a listserv that's been around from, I don't know, I would say 30 years. That's, navigated over to Facebook. So for German teachers, I used to wake up every morning as a new teacher, read that listserv and get some ideas that I can incorporate that day. And even today, I still look at it like, wow, look at someone who's sharing. They're all sharing free activities and worksheets and ideas for songs and news. And Joshua, it's a great community, but definitely forming networks within your professional organizations, I would say, is key.
When I first started teaching, my first year out of college in 1997, I taught at a small school on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And there was one German teacher, and I was the one French teacher. And that German teacher, I remember, this was the late 90s. She was so entrenched in what was like TPRS at that time and doing TPR and talking about proficiency in a way that I didn't hear Spanish teachers and French teachers talking about until 2010. So I just remember that first year with that first German teacher that she really like set it into me like, wow, the German teachers are the ones that are above, like they're ahead of the curve with this. So I definitely hear what you're saying, and I experienced that personally. And I hope there's more opportunities for all of us to learn from German teachers. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to throw a recommendation out there, and that is that if anyone listening is at Actful, that they go to your workshop, which is hands-on German activities that motivate and engage. And that is going to be on Saturday, November 22nd, and it's at 2:30. So if you are at Actful, you can hang out with Heidi there. So speaking of hanging out with you, Heidi, what are some ways that teachers could be reaching out to you, particularly German teachers, maybe if they want to be collaborating with you?
I am happy to communicate with other teachers. You can email me. I think most German teachers out there probably know how to locate me, but my email is heidi@heidilechner.com. It's my name. Just reach out. I'm happy to start a conversation.
Yeah, I'll make sure that your email address is in the show notes so that teachers can be reaching out to you. And as we end the conversation, I always like to leave our listeners with what I call a hearty piece of advice about life, about teaching German, teaching motivating activities. What's something that you could leave with us that we can ponder throughout the day?
I am going to end on a positive note, and I would like to tell all teachers that they should laugh a little more with their students, because that's what I try to tell myself. Before the pandemic, I had a session called Why Can't Every Day Be a Party in the World Language Classroom? It's a wordy title, but what I meant was I don't save games for just a review day before the test. I make sure that every day we're listening to music, we are laughing, we are having fun with the language, and I'm making students want to come back, and I want to have fun. So I think we need a lot more laughter these days, and it shouldn't be so serious. I think the more that you make the laughter happen, kids will feel at ease in your class, and it all comes back to you because they're going to be willing to take more risks and use the language. So that's what I wish for people.
All right. Just find ways to laugh in your classroom. Find things funny. Absolutely. And when the kids are all saying 6, 7, find a way to laugh about it, right? Do they do that in German?
Of course I do. 6, 7. I mean, come on. It's the phrase of the year.
Yes. So just laugh. Like don't fight that stuff. Like find a way to bring it in and just have some fun with it. Well, thank you very much for hanging out with me. This has been a lot of fun for me. I really appreciate it. And I hope teachers will have an opportunity to go to your workshop at Actful that's being sponsored by Clet World Languages in the exhibit hall. And hopefully we could do this again soon because I have more questions and I want to pick your brain about what's going on in your classroom. But thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show, Joshua. It was fabulous.
What are your takeaways from that conversation with Heidi Lechner? Now, I know that I'm thinking about how to teach students to communicate in both their native language and the target language. So be sure to check out the show notes to connect with Heidi Lechner. And thank you personally for all of the work that you do on a daily basis to support and motivate your students. I very much appreciate and enjoy supporting you and your language teacher colleagues all across the country as you bring effective, proficiency-focused strategies into your classrooms. A reminder that I provide on-site and remote workshops, a program for self-paced departmental PD, and quick win courses for individual teachers just like you. You can find all the links in the show notes or on my website, wlclassroom.com. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And let's stay connected on social media. You can find me at WL Classroom pretty much everywhere. You'll also find lots of ideas, suggestions, and resources on my website, wlclassroom.com. Now stay curious, keep learning, and continue the great work you do inspiring and supporting your students.